Sheri, thank you for sitting down with me.
Nice to be here, Marc.
And we're here in Banff for the Prairie Grain Development Committee 2023 meetings. You're chair of the PGDC. This is the first PGDC meeting in 2 years since the pandemic began.
Yes.
What's most exciting for you this year?
You know, what I love is that we're having the opportunity to interact outside the formal meetings. As I walked over here for the interview, you know, I saw groups of people having that sit down, that informal conversation that is just impossible in a Zoom meeting. You know, during a Zoom meeting, the business gets done, but you can't have robust conversations. You have people cutting in and out with sound. You try and have some conversation in the chat box and you're 3 chats behind. So this just allows for that collaboration, those friendships to build. And I think, you know, as a result of that, the industry will be stronger having these back to in-person meetings that I love being able to provide that for this community.
Yeah, I bet. And well, PGDC, I mean, it's such an important organization. I mean, it recommends lines to government for variety registration. It's a hugely important organization. From your perspective, why is PGDC such a critical institution?
You know, there's 4 kind of key pillars that I think the Prairie Grain Development Committee tries to achieve. And the first is to be an exchange for information relative to the development of improved cultivars for grain crops for our Western Canadian farmers. You know, it's the forum where these support for registration documents are reviewed by peers, they're vetted, and it gives that confidence in the science. So if I can give you an example from Wheat Ryan Triticale, the committee that I'm a member on. So I am a member of the agronomy evaluation team, and in that team there's breeders, agronomists, seed company representatives, and farmers. And this group looks at the yield, how is it compared to the check, the test weight, maturity, lodging, things like that. So that's what that committee does, and they review that data because the experts are there. Then there's the disease evaluation team, and that includes the pathologists, the molecular biologists, and here they look at the genetic resistance of the diseases to the various pathogens, and I think the top one probably being Fusarium head blight, because that's probably the pathogen that puts our industry at most risk. And then there's the quality evaluation team, and this includes cereal chemists, millers and bakers, seed company reps, marketing reps, and making sure that the quality of the varieties that we recommend for registration do meet the bar for maintaining Canada's reputation as a high quality grain provider. So I think that's kind of number 1, and my other ones won't be quite as long here, but you know, our second mandate is to advise regulatory agencies. So for example, CFIA, regarding legislation and how the regulations impact breeding and cultivar production in the sector development. Thirdly, we need to be that forum to facilitate scientific discussion, communicating research priorities for the improvement of the grain sector. And finally, you know, while I am chair, I think the role of the executive is the big one is to make sure we have a group meeting for these 4 recommending committees. So in many ways, I see myself as a glorified event planner, and you know, we have staff to do that. But that's what I think the executive makes sure happens, is that these meetings do happen, and there is that in-person meeting possible.
You're more than an event planner, although you were partly responsible for planning tomorrow's plenary session that we're all going to see. And it focuses heavily on regulatory matters, like you mentioned. What was your thinking in designing the theme for this?
Yeah, so our entire executive has input. So there's, you know, myself, the secretary, treasurer, and a member at large, and then we have reps from the 4 recommending committees. And back in the summer, we met kind of what's hot in the industry, what do we need to talk about, what do the attendees need to kind of have a current status update on. And you know, it was felt that we're facing many pivotal changes in terms of the regulatory world. There's innovations occurring in our seed sector, and it's important that those who are needing to comply with the regulations and adapt to the innovation need to be aware of what the playing field is. So in that respect, for the plenary, you know, we we are talking latest and greatest on plant breeding innovation. So we've got Jennifer Hubert, who is the Executive Director from Plant Biotechnology with CropLife Canada. She's going to be talking about the regulatory landscape, both domestically and internationally. And then she's also going to talk about commercialization of plant breeding innovations and the importance of stewardship and transparency. And then we're going to have Lauren come in, who's the Regulatory Affairs Manager with Seeds Canada. And she's going to give us an example of how they can enable innovation through industry-led transparency initiatives. And that's going to a database to verify plants with novel traits and things like that. So it's really important to have our membership aware of these regulatory issues. The next, I think, big topic, there's a lot of chatter around the meeting here about nationally registered varieties and regional growing of them or regional restrictions. So CFIA is going to come in and kind of, make it clear what the current regulations are and how regional restrictions can apply to nationally registered varieties. So that's a big one. And then there are also ripple implications, how the Canadian Grain Commission deals with I don't want to say follow, but the secondary implications on the variety designation list. So I think we've got a plenary that's really full of that baseline information so that our breeders, our seed companies can understand the regulatory field that's out there right now.
Speaking of varieties, you were on our recent webinar regarding regional variety trials. And in addition to being PGDC chair, you also coordinate Alberta's regional variety trials. Obviously, what happens here at PGDC has a huge impact on those variety trials. Can you talk a little bit about that connection?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe, for people who aren't quite aware what goes on here, there's 4 recommending committees, and maybe it might not hurt to just run through what those 4 are. So we have wheat, rye, and triticale for those crop types, so PRC, WRT. And then we have oat and barley, which some of us call PERCOB. And then there's the pulse and special crop groups, and then there's oil seeds. So each of these committees, they are reviewing lines that are up for registration, and this is the group that is that scientific expert to vet the data and say, yes, this is better than or equal to what we have now. And once our committees approve it, then CFIA takes this information that comes from us, and the Variety Registration Office reviews it, and they are the ones who grant registration. After that registration has been granted, a variety is tendered, and seed companies, your CCAN, your FP Genetics, your Alliance, your Cantera, all have the opportunity to bid on varieties or make some sort of an arrangement to own the rights to distribute that. And once that part is done, then those seed distributors can enter the varieties into, for example, the Alberta Regional Variety Trials. And the seed company or the distributor pays $1,400 to put them in the Alberta trials, and we test them throughout the province of Alberta. And there's similar programs in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And, another part of it is that the data that is discussed here, Alberta has just recently made the decision to include some of that into our historical database. So me being here and being aware of, understanding the depth and the story behind the data is really important for that too. So lots of linkages between the regional trials and what's going on at this step before they get to us. And my counterparts from Saskatchewan and Manitoba are here too. So there is value in us being here at these meetings and understanding the process.
Yeah, for sure. And before I let you go, you mentioned on our webinar some potential opportunities for the future of Alberta's variety trials. And really, there's a lot of opportunities for variety trials across Canada, across the prairies. Can you talk a little bit about some of those potential opportunities?
Yeah, I think, we are needing collaborations more than ever. As resources, both financial and capacity, are more and more limited, under more and more stress, we have to find efficiencies in the system. And I think that is where RVAC, so the Alberta Regional Variety Advisory Committee, decided to now start including yield and agronomic data trying to partner with Saskatchewan and Manitoba and see where we can find efficiencies, reduce any duplication, and just make the best use of the resources. And a lot of that is relationship building and trusted relationships. So, when I can talk to the breeders and we have those relationships, it's much easier to facilitate that information sharing and data sharing. So it is an industry built on relationships, and I think that's what this meeting's all about.
Exactly. That's very true. Thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Marc.